This is my Tamiya King Cab that I bought just over a year ago. And in this video, I'm going to talk to you about why I bought it, my plans for restoring it, and what happens next. Let's get to it. Hi, I'm James and this is Mostly Helpful. And I've already done a number of videos about restoring some of these vintage Tamiya radio control cars. I had one back in the day when I was 11 or 12 in the 80s. And ever since having a little bit more time and a bit more money as an adult, I've wanted to get back into the hobby, and here we are. I've done a Monster Beetle, but during that process, this came up for sale, and the Tamiya King Cab, for some reason, is a really revered model. And this one was local, and I thought, absolutely, let's buy it and understand a little bit more about why everyone rates them so highly. Now, unlike my Monster Beetle, which was something of a basket case when it arrived, this one actually looks to be in fairly good condition. But what's unusual about this is that the chassis shows very little wear. There's very little wear underneath here, and everything is complete. But the body shell has had a real beating. There is the King Cab body shell by Tamiya was notable for being quite fragile, as I've since learnt, but pretty much every corner has got parts missing where it's obviously slid along the ground. So it's clearly been driven around, assuming this is the original body shell to this chassis. But in all other respects, I've got a really good model here. In this photo that I'm putting up on the screen, you can see that it came originally with some Monster Beetle pin spike tyres, which I deployed onto that Monster Beetle project because I managed to find an original and vintage set of tyres correct for this model. They were surprisingly expensive, even though they were used. There was something of the order of £24 for the four, but they complete the look and they make this King Cab look like a proper King Cab. Other things I've done before making this video is I've installed Carson reflex system, and I've installed that in here with the Tamiya electronic speed controller that I bought for that project as well. It all runs, so if we plug this in here, I've got a battery here as well. Everything is working well and connected up. I programmed the speed controller for forward, brake and reverse, and that's all good there too. What, however, the previous owner didn't do was that he did not have oil in the shocks for some inexplicable reason, so it's very, very bongy and bouncy. Luckily, though, he provided the Tamiya damper oil. And then the other thing he hasn't done is he hadn't put any grease in the gearbox. He didn't provide the right grease, so I invested a substantial sum of money for a very small tube of genuine Tamiya ball diff grease. So what we're going to do today is we're going to make this complete in as much as we're going to put oil in the dampers, redo the diff with that grease, and talk about the diff in particular, because that is I now understand a known weak point with the Tamiya King Cab. So let's get the screwdrivers out and have a play. So I have taken the other three dampers off the car and we'll do them here like this. Yeah, rear damper and front damper exactly the same length. Definitely not the same springs though. That is definitely firmer. And now the last one. This is the rear piece. No oil in it though at the moment. Let's hope what's remaining in here is just enough. Right, anyway, let's get them back on the car. One for the Kevin Talbot fans there. So, dampers on the car, let's check. Are we okay? Yeah, that's much better, isn't it? Much less boingy. So, dampers done, let's turn our attention to the gearbox. So with the gearbox apart, it's not pretty particularly, but I've managed to get it out, no dramas. And the area that I need to use the ball diff grease is just under here. So I'm just going to get this undone and then we'll get into it. Now, my understanding of this is that it's a sort of slipper diff. So it uses a set of tiny little balls and then a couple of thrust washers and that kind of thing. And my understanding is that you can't put a lot of power through this system because it tends to slip too much. And there's all sorts of people who do fixes in terms of they either glue it together to lock it out, or if they don't do that and they put too much power in, it burns out. And there are a number of aftermarket solutions to this problem that involve bevel gears rather than balls. I'm not going to do any of that. I'm just going to get it working kind of as Tamiya expected, and then just get it driving and see how we go on. Right, so my drive cups are out. So what I should now be able to do is to pull this out, if I recall correctly. Go. And that is our slippy diff in there. So need to take that apart and apply some of this grease. And there we go. And then just in here, you can see all the little balls, and it's those that we need to cover in grease, or the correct grease. And then in here, and some more balls. And again, I need to do the same thing here. So here's the diff disassembled, and as I mentioned, it's got lots of tiny parts, very surprising. What is of a concern is that I am missing some bits. There's a very, very thin washer here. Tamiya call it the differential spacer. I've only got one of those, and it's missing on this side. And then I've got this one here. If I read this is apparently called the disc spring. And I've only got one of those, and there should be one on either side in both cases. But we are where we are, so I must assemble it, or I need to assemble it to get it to work. So let's see how we get on. So I've got the instructions here. That was the other nice thing about this model, actually. It came with a complete and original set of King Cab instructions. So I've at least got something to refer to here and make sure that I'm doing it correctly. I got that wrong, by the way. This one that I've only got one of here is a thrust washer. Right, let's get on. So that's the ball diff assembled as per the instructions that I've got here. And now what I need to do according to the instructions is now remove these drive cups, and then I can insert it back into the case, reinsert the drive cup. So that's the gearbox fully greased up. Now all I need to do is put my cover back on, just do it like that, screw it up, and then put it all back together into the car. And there we go, that's the car back together. My conclusion is that the Tamiya Nissan King Cab is quite a fiddly model. That's taken quite a bit of time to get back together. This radio tray that sits up here prevents you from accessing some of the screws underneath without a pair of pliers. Luckily I've got some. So in conclusion then, what have I achieved today? Well, I've got oil in my dampers, and also used a whole tube of ball diff grease getting that ball diff set up correctly, and then greased all of the rest of the gears using this ceramic grease. So hopefully with the body shell on, we are good for a run. But just before we take it outside, let's just turn things on and just check that everything is still up together and working correctly. So we've got steering, I haven't touched that, but let's just check this gearbox. Feels a little smoother, I'm not sure if that's a placebo. So as you've just seen in that video, all is not well with the King Cab, and I'm definitely experiencing ball diff slip from it. As it's trying to go up the drive, you can hear the motor spinning furiously, and the car just doesn't seem to be gaining speed particularly easily. So in the week that's passed since I filmed that, what I've decided to do is I've actually decided to sell it. So it's currently on eBay, I've taken the electronics out of it, and I've got about a day and a half for that auction to go. But it's not all bad news. Let me talk to you about some of the figures involved here because I paid £130 for this, and give or take I laid a £5 fuel for going and get it. It wasn't very far. £135 is where I'm in, and I spent £24 on these tyres and £5 on that ball diff grease. However, this model came originally with a full set of ACOM's radio gear, which is able to sell. Those Monster Beetle tyres that I mentioned, I also sold those. And I was also able to sell the original box that this came with for a surprising figure of something of the order of £50 when it went to Malta, of all places. So hello, if you're from Malta and you have a King Cab and you've got the box from this model, I hope you're enjoying it. All of that means that I've got about £100 back from the model already. And currently the high bid on this is £160 with a day and a half to go. So it was never my intention to make a profit, but it looks like I'm going to make a reasonably tidy profit anyway, which is fantastic. I've got a chance to experience the King Cab. It hasn't worked out for me, but I'm sure it will go to a good home where someone will either turn it into a shelf queen with a new body shell, or hopefully get that diff fixed, put on some better, grippier tyres and turn it into a runner. That, though, is the end of this video, and indeed there's only going to be one video on the Nissan King Cab. So thank you as always for watching, and if you like this kind of content, do let me know. Coming up in another video very soon, though, will be the restoration of my HPI Nitro MT2, which is giving me no end of trouble, and I'm sure will make for great watching. I look forward to coming to you again with that video very soon. Thanks and goodbye.